Hello, I'm here with my paranormal stories. Tonight we're going to go back to 2017. That's not normally where we do these episodes from. Normally we do these things live. I've got some really good ones that are coming in for this particular series, so we're going to jump back into 2017. This one was sent to me by a viewer. This is scary. I hope I didn't wake anybody up. Yeah, there was a lot of screaming going on there. Okay, here we go. My house has a secret room. I have lived in my house for 4 years now. The house was built in 1963. When I moved in, did a fair amount of renovations, including removing walls to open up the kitchen and living room. It was always my intention to renovate the basement and make it livable. My plan was to finish the basement when my son moved in. He would then pay rent until he could afford to buy his own place. One day, while removing paneling in the basement, I found a hole in the wall that had been covered by a large armoire. I thought it was just a closet, so I put my head and shoulder into the space and yelled out, "Is anyone in there?" Silence. Then I felt around for an outlet switch or a light switch to turn on the light and investigate further. I couldn't find anything. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it through the hole and saw what looked like a dark opening on the other side. Not knowing what was behind the wall, I went to get my stud finder to see if the opening had been framed in. The stud finder indicated that there was a 2x4 on either side of the hole, but nothing across the top. As I'm investigating, my dog starts barking and growling. I calmed him down and continued on. I tried to look through the hole again and realized that it wasn't an opening, but rather a narrow crack between the foundation and the floor joists. I went up to the basement stairs and started to crawl on my hands and knees to get a better look. That's when I heard footsteps above me on the main floor. I stopped and froze. I listened and heard them again. Someone or something was walking back and forth directly above me. At this point, I decided that I had had enough, and I was going to call the police. As I stood up, whatever was up there stopped walking. I called the police and explained what had happened. They told me to go ahead and check it out, and they would meet me there in about 10 minutes. I took my flashlight and crawled under the house to try to get a better look at the hole. I couldn't see any way into the space, so I crawled out from under the house and went back up the basement stairs. As I'm standing there, I hear the footsteps again. Now they were closer and they sounded louder. I heard what sounded like whispers. I knew that I didn't want to be under the house anymore. I ran up the basement stairs, called out to the police, and waited. As I'm waiting, I start looking around the basement trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. I started checking all of the doors and windows to make sure that they were locked. And then I noticed that the door that leads to the garage was slightly ajar. I opened it fully and stepped outside. It was then that I noticed that one of the cement blocks that forms the foundation of the house had been dislodged. I walked over to the block and looked underneath. I could see some boards and some insulation. I don't remember why, but I decided to pull the boards away from the foundation. As I did, I saw a very small gap between the foundation and the floor joists. I shone my flashlight into the gap and saw what looked like a dark opening. I couldn't tell if it was a hole or just a shadow. With the police still only 10 minutes away, I went back inside to wait. I sat on the basement steps and tried to calm myself down. I figured that the sound I had heard was just mice or maybe rats. I didn't want to believe that there was someone or something living in the walls of my house, but I couldn't help but wonder. The thought of finding human bones or maybe a dead body kept running through my mind. When the police arrived, they didn't find anything. We checked everywhere. I even let them crawl under the house. They said that they would stop by later in the week to continue the investigation, but I never saw them again. After the police left, I went back to check out the hole again. I still couldn't see into it, and it was still only about the width of a broomstick. But this time, I could feel air moving from inside the wall. I pushed on the boards that covered the opening, and they moved slightly. I pushed on them again, and they came right out. I have no idea how long the crawl space had been sealed off for, but it smelled stale and earthy. I shone my flashlight around and saw a dirt floor and what looked like a pile of clothes in the corner. I got on my hands and knees and crawled into the space. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone in there?" Silence. I could hear my own breathing and my heartbeat. The air was stale, but there was no smell of mildew or rot. The temperature was normal, not cold or damp like I expected. I tried to ignore the feeling that I was being watched and continued on. It wasn't very far to the pile of clothes. As I got closer, I could see that they were old and dirty, but there was nothing unusual about them. I looked around and noticed what appeared to be a crudely made wooden table in the corner. On it were two glass jars. One of the jars had a blue lid, and the other was black. I reached out to pick up the blue jar, and it fell to the ground and shattered. Glass went everywhere. I quickly crawled out of the hole to avoid cuts from the broken glass. I crawled back in to look for the black jar, but it was gone. Now terrified, and with adrenaline pumping through my veins, I got out of the hole and ran upstairs. I paced around the house, yelling for my dog, who was hiding under the bed. I couldn't bring myself to go back into the basement. I called my son and told him to come over immediately. When he arrived, I told him what I had found, and we went down to check it out together. We went back into the basement and into the hole. He checked around and asked me to get the flashlight so that he could look into the pile of clothes. He dug through the clothes and pulled out what looked like men's dress shoes. He also found what looked like an old leather belt. He checked everywhere but couldn't find the black jar. I offered my son money to stay and help me clean it all up, but he declined and left. I ended up taking most of the stuff out, but there was so much dirt that I couldn't take it all out. I figured that whoever had been living in there had probably brought the stuff with them when they left. I filled in the hole and covered it with concrete. I never did finish renovating the basement. It's been for years since I found the secret room, and to this day I do unknow what was in the room or who had been living in there, and that's my story. I'm here with my paranormal podcast. If you want to send me your story, you can do so through the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.